little bit more about Booker T. Washington School and MLK's visit.
That day, November 27, 1962, I think I was 15 years old, was a day that everybody who went will remember. King was invited by a league of voters. My pastor, Dr. James H. Costin, who was pastor at Mount Pisgah at the time, was on the podium, on the dais, on stage, as it were, in the Booker T. Gymnasium. A good 2,000 people were packed in there. Reverend, the late James Costin, and the late James, Dudley, Reverend Dudley was his name. He invited him, and he had written letters way before to ask him to come. And King came and spoke in Rocky Mount, North Carolina. That was the first I Have a Dream speech before 1963 and the March on Washington. Actually, the March on Washington speech, I'm told by historians, he was not to speak, do that I Have a Dream speech. But there was a lady in the background, you probably heard of her, Harriet Jackson, said, Doc, what about the dream? She kept saying, Doc, what about the dream? So he finally said, I have a dream that is deeply rooted in the American dream. And so here comes I Have a Dream again. That night, it was a frenzy all week. I was the only one who didn't know. I heard him talking that King was coming. And he spoke at Booker T that night. And everybody came out in their finest. I think one of my mentors, Dr. Melva Costin, who now lives in Atlanta, and she's the wife of the late Dr. James H. Costin, who became president of ITC, he did. He also sponsored my whole seminary education for my Master of Divinity. Matter of fact, I went to school, and they paid me to go to school. Paid me $200 a month to go to school. And that was real money, believe me, in 1972, 73.
Where did you get your degree?
From Johnson C. Smith Seminary, which was part of the Interdenominational Theological Center, with 7 different African-American seminaries located there. And so that night King spoke, and the whole town was there. Black folk had more hope than I had ever seen us have. Folk began, and King, this whole dream concept of King, Dr. Jason Middle from North Carolina State University is an expert on this, and we talk quite often. Coretta was friends with Langston Hughes. They were very close friends. And if Langston Hughes was seriously putting his signature to something, everything he signed was in green ink. If it wasn't in green ink, it wasn't Langston Hughes' signature. King got into dreams with Langston Hughes, a dream deferred, that kind of thing with Langston Hughes. What happens to a dream deferred is it ends up like a raisin in the sun. It just dropped like a raisin in the sun. Those kind of dream concepts, King studied often with Langston Hughes. And then King, studied with his mentor, Howard Thurman, at Howard University. And it was very interesting. I also would give condolences to one of my special mentors, Dr. Wyatt T. Walker, who's passed recently. And when Wyatt T. Walker was getting his doctorate, I was his assistant, graduate assistant at ITC. So I learned a lot about the King family. I learned a lot about it. And I told him the story when I first met Martin Luther King. The next night, if you remember the biblical story, Jesus got lost in the temple, and they were looking for Jesus. They were upset with Jesus. And Jesus ended up getting chastised, okay? The next night, we were at the St. John's AME Zion Church on Atlantic Avenue. Atlantic Avenue was kind of like where the black folk lived who were professionals. And I went back and when the King said, see if King would remember me from the night before. Of course he did. And he invited me back in the back with all of the ministers. And I was back there with all of the big name preachers. And I knew I wanted, to be a pastor. When I came out, and my uncle said, son, we have been looking for you, and what happened to you? You were lost. We've been all out here looking for you. And so I remember the Bible scripture, it's time for me to be about my Father's business. That didn't go well at all. I can't tell you the gory details, but it did not go well at all. And I had to go back and read that scripture and say, oh, that's not what you tell an adult who's taking care of you and you're living in their house. I should have exegeted this text a lot better than I did. And I would have said, oh, I'm sorry. I would say, I'm sorry. I got carried away with Dr. King and the ministers in the back room talking, and it won't happen again. And that's what I expect my children to say.
Who was in the room? Do you remember the ministers?
Reverend Dr. George Dudley, who invited him, Dr. Carson, I think maybe Mr. W.T. Grimes, I'm not sure. Mr. W.T. Grimes played the music, directed the mass choir that night. And my aunt was asking me the other day, my Aunt Martha was asking me, what songs do they sing? Martha, 1962. I don't know what songs they sang. Then we said, Ain't Got Time to Die. Lord, I keep so busy working for the master, ain't got time to die. But I remember that song because also when I toured with Johnson C. Smith University's touring choir, we sang that under the late Jerome Cherry led that song, Ain't Got Time to Die. Jerome Cherry, the late Jerome Cherry, was also the lion in the Whiz on Broadway. And I remember we sang Ain't Got, that was one of also the late Mr. Kemp, that was one of his favorite songs that he liked on the tour, Ain't Got Time to Die.
Are you able to sing it?
Yeah, sometimes. But it was a tenor, I was a bass, it was a tenor. Lord, I keep so busy working for the master. Keep so busy working for the master. Lord, I keep so busy working for the master. Ain't got time to die. Kind of, sort of like that. That was my tenor voice, and I'm a bass. But anyway, I'll go back to my day job. But anyway, touring in that choir was very, very significant for me, also Johnson C. Smith, because I learned about our heritage in Negro spirituals, our heritage in gospel, the heritage we had, and being mentored by Wyatt T. Walker. There's a book we used to use called Savannah Syncopators, and it would show you how the syncopation of all of our spirit in the hymns and what we sing, how this came out of the church.
Tell me a little bit about that.
I did my work, one of the theses I did was the Africanisms in the spirituals and the blues, the flattened seventh note that you hear in the blues. That when at Saturday night and Sunday morning, there's not a lot of difference for the black music. You might hear in the nightclub, and then Sunday morning, wait a minute, that sounds similar. Amazing Grace might be rocking in the juke joint one night, and then Sunday morning it's a different type of Amazing Grace. Some people didn't like gospel because they liked the hymns, and the Presbyterians were stoic. And right now the Presbyterians are no longer chosen frozen. They were stoic, and they sung hymns and wore robes and walked in straight lines and held their head up high. Now you got Presbyterian. We have drums in the church finally here, and the whole syncopation. You would go into certain churches, the so-called, quote, primitive Baptist churches, and they still exist, no piano, no electrical music. And you would hear the feet stomping, and you would sit in the section, yours might be, another section, and you'd be in your section, and that in itself was a choir. And the songs were sung. And so the syncopation that's in our hearts, now we have hip hop. And one of my professors, I think Dean John Kinney at Virginia Union, my doctorate was from Samuel Dewitt Proctor School of Theology. Dean Kinney would say he understood hip hop because the children were hip hurt. And they needed hip hope. And so that's how I was able to appreciate that and to get into hip hop and listen to rap music. What they were saying is sometimes it's vile, but then isn't life, especially when you kill 17 people in a school. Life is vile and vicious, and we have to keep hope alive, as my boy would say. Keep hope alive, Jesse Jackson would say. It tickled me when Jesse was, we were talking about Ebonics, and Ebonics is a legitimate language because it has 7 subsets. I be, you be, we be. I be going to the movie. You be going, they be going, you know. Mama be, she be all the time. She be's going, you know. She be's going to church all the time. And he was going to criticize it. And he's the poster child for Ebonics. Keep hope, up with hope, down with dope. Keep hope alive. You the poster child for Ebonics. Leave those people alone. Let's take a pause.
So we were talking about Ebonics, but I want to get back to Booker T. Washington
Okay.
again.
Okay.
You wrote about punishment having led to you being able to witness this or see King, and then you just mentioned something about you actually didn't see the speech because of your color.
No, I saw the speech. I was there.
Okay.
I was in the gym that night.
Okay. You said something about not witnessing something because you were too black or something?
Oh, couldn't go to the library. Couldn't go to Braswell Library. And that's where they found his speech in the archives in a box in the back somewhere on a tape, reel-to-reel tape. But I couldn't go to that library. So remember I said Miss Morgan we had our own little colored library in her house, in her living room. And I couldn't go to the library, which seems odd to me now. But I couldn't go to that library. But I could go to the Booker T. Washington High School library.
I misunderstood.
Mm-hmm.
So the punishment that led to you
Was I had to go and rake her leaves and apologize to the quote that old folks used to do was beg her pardon. And I had to go and rake her leaves and not charge her anything. But not only did she give me money, she gave me ginger cookies, homemade, that she baked while we were talking.
And then how did this lead to you witnessing the speech?
Because I was like the top student in world history. Because she made sure I was the top student in world history.
And she wanted you to be there?
She wanted me to be there to witness Dr. Martin Luther King when he came. And she arranged for me to sit down with him firsthand.
And tell me about the Coca-Cola story.
Well, they offered us Coca-Colas when we came in as students. And you just didn't get to drink a soda in school, man. Couldn't drink sodas in school. But that night we could. Short Coca-Colas, the ones that, would last forever and never go flat, and we suspect the cocaine was in them, all that kind of stuff, that kind of thing. The Coca-Colas that were really very strong. You put a top on them, you would take corrosion off your batteries, but yet you drank them. Okay. And so, and that was very interesting because Pepsi was created in North Carolina, Coke was created in Atlanta. And so, but the night Coca-Cola was going to come in and was going to shoot the gym and everything, and they looked up, the Pepsi scoreboard is still in there. That was in there when King spoke those years ago. So Coke didn't kind of appreciate that one, so we didn't do it. But on February 23rd, next Friday night, in Rocky Mount, North Carolina, they're going to reenact King in that very same gym. And I wanted to be there, but I have to be here because the National Murray Potter Community Choir is singing at Timothy Darling Presbyterian Church. Same night. So that's how the story goes.
Tell me something about your vision of segregated education versus today. What?
Well, you know, it didn't bother me because so-called separate but equal. And then we had, what was it, Plessy versus Ferguson. We had the Dred Scott decision, all these things that happened to us. I was kind of sheltered from some of those things. We went on marches in Rocky Mount. There was a place called the Ivy Room where they spit on us when we marched. Now it's a place that everybody goes to get a cheeseburger. I was only able to go back there maybe once or twice, and now I still can't do it. I don't do it anymore. But I will always go to Booney's Hot Dogs because you could go to Booney's Hot Dogs. We had a place called a motel that made the best barbecue in eastern North Carolina. New Hope Free Will Baptist Church in Washington, D.C., under the direction of Dr. Ernestine Battle, who was my classmate at Booker T, have a Rocky Mount Day every year. 400 or 500 people gather. They eat all the foods at Rocky Mount. I call it a cholesterol festival. They eat all the foods that we used to have in Rocky Mount. Your spirit, Ms. Reed, shows Rocky Mount. There was a spirit in Rocky Mount. There was a quiet, determined, hopeful, energetic, assertive, we will succeed spirit that was in Rocky Mount. You may be black, you may be this. And I used to make jokes about myself. I would say in August, I would be so black that you get in the car and the oil light would come on. And my wife hates me to make that kind of joke. But in other words, my aunt's mother, Miss Davis, used to always say, stand on your own toes, get one foot and stand on your own toes, and then everybody else can stand on them. And so consequently, what I was able to do, I made jokes, but Rocky Mount segregation, I had the Booker T Theater. I had Douglas Block. I had Mr. Sherman Brown, who was my uncle's best friend. And I knew he was my uncle's best friend. I knew they drank liquor together. And he was my uncle's best friend. They hunted together. And they told lies together. And they had fun together. I knew they went to the juke joints together. So it was kind of a blackmail. I would go and say, Mr. Brown, I'm kind of short on funds today. What you want? Oh, I would like a barbecue sandwich. I would like French fries. I would like a cherry Coke, please. And then he would say to me the next time, do you ever have any money? And I would laugh. And I went to his wife's funeral. And I laughed with her before she passed away about how that whole community in Rocky Mount engulfed me. I didn't know I was missing stuff. Because Douglas Block was where the African-American businesses were. The only thing I didn't necessarily like about Douglas Block was Bernet's drugstore, because when my grandmama sent me to Bernet's drugstore, she knew I liked cherry Coke, okay? But the cherry Coke was casserole for my spring cleaning. And if you ever had the real casserole with some big, hairy, greasy balls, seemed like in the bottom of the cherry Coke, you had to stir it up well. And my uncle Ben Bullock worked in there, so he watched me drink it down and rush back to the house because things were going to happen. But that was. They put casserole in the cherry Coke.
For African Americans?
Yeah, some of our children would get sent there if we had colds, or to prevent us from having flu and prevent us from having pneumonia and stuff. We drank that casserole once a year. You ever heard of asphyxia bags? It was a stinky stuff that you wore around your neck, and it kept everything away, colds, everything. I think it kept boys away from girls, too. And that asphyxia bag.
What was in it?
Everything that, I said everything the devil created was in that bag, but now not really. I know garlic was in it. And I know, that's the only thing I know, I smell the garlic in it. And the old folk would have to tell you what was in there. The recipe for what was in there. Some herbs were in there. And you wore it, and you could breathe it while you were wearing it. And they said it cured my juvenile asthma. I don't know. They said it worked well with asthmatic children.
Did your grandmother put that
And
on?
my grandmother I had it once, and after that, I was cured of everything because I didn't want that bag on me no more.
Do you remember her actually making it and putting it together? I think we need to.
Yes, we need to pause.
Okay. Okay, we're returning, and we were talking about segregation in Rocky Mount, and you had mentioned some of the racial incidents.
It was very interesting because even when the North Carolina Symphony Orchestra came, it would come to Booker T, then it would go to the white school. So it was sort of separate but equal. But it was always separate and unequal if you really look at it. But what was concerning me, our teachers went overboard, way beyond the call of duty. Miss Marguerite Armstrong, Brenda Armstrong's mother, that also went there that night to see Martin Luther King. She would have classes on Saturday for advanced English students. And I remember to get out of her class, you had to do a Shakespearean piece. But you also would have to know about Phyllis Wheatley, and you also would have to know about other scholars, and you would have to read books that black folk wrote. And you have to know about I've Known Rivers and things of that sort.
Did you ever see the Klan?
Oh, yeah.
Tell me about that.
Well, two things happened. One, Dr. James H. Costin, and now still living, J. Oscar McLeod, who was retired from the Presbyterian Church, Dr. J. Oscar McLeod. Dr. J. Oscar McLeod in 1964 took me to Buckhorn, Kentucky. Now you talking about dirt poor. Those folk, they had dirt. That was about all they had. And we did a work camp, and we tore down a gym, and we built stuff for kids and stuff. And when I came back, two things happened. One, they had an international work camp around Rocky Mount, Elm City. White kids would come down, and we would work together. We scraped buildings and painted churches, painted the Elm City Presbyterian Church, did the work on the outside of it, cleaned up the yard, whatever. And at the black swimming pool, the white kids could come, and they would swim with us. Well, not me, because I couldn't swim, but they would swim with us. And the Klan got involved in that. Then,
What did they do?
well, they would start coming around the church and what have you. Dr. Costin was invited to preach Easter sunrise service at the lake, which was one of those special anointed places only white folk could go to on Easter sunrise. And the Klan told him not to do it. He was threatened, his life was threatened. He did it anyway. And Mr. Pete Rollins, Mr. Hawkins, remember Miss Esmerella Hawkins who got me to world history? Her husband, and as a boy, I had to be with them as they had to guard Dr. Costin's house all night, round-the-clock guard on his house, sitting out the car. Then I met the Klan when my Aunt Marion's was married to Thomas Stith Jr. Her brother, we call pot liquor, and some people call him lemonade, Curtis Parker, got a job transporting mail back and forth to Washington, D.C., Richmond places on this truck. And they didn't want a black man to have that job. So we had to kind of guard him for a while. His son now, whom we call Juice, Juice now and his wife also have their business now. But we had to do that. And those were the two instances that I knew of the Klan. And they kind of marched through town a couple of times. But, we didn't know whether they were clowns or Klan. Both of the words sound like they could both be K. But so I consider them clowns more than anything else because I didn't know the danger.
Did you said that you got spit on
That was the march when we were marching by the Ivory Room so we could eat, so we could go in and spend our money and eat with somebody who didn't like us.
tell me about an occasion when that happened.
That was during the march, and my uncle got me out of that because he didn't want me to go through stuff like that. I only did about one march then. The other marches I did were in Atlanta when I was in grad school. I led a couple of marches because I was being tutored by Hosea Williams from SCLC. And so a couple of other marches I led. Then I learned about relationships in the South. Come on, I learned about relationships. My uncle, Charles Stiff, we call him Uncle Bird. Charles Lindbergh Stiff, we call him Uncle Bird. Uncle Bird was a legend. Sometimes I'm working on it, but I have a mouth like my Uncle Bird. Uncle Bird didn't play. Uncle Bird told me one day, I'm a proud graduate of the 8th grade. And I said, okay. His brother, David Stiff, finished NCCU, almost finished law school. Okay. Those were the three brothers that I had such extraordinary idols to look up to. Thomas Stiff Jr., who worked at Rosenblum Levy department store. He delivered packages. But also, as I looked at what he did later on, he ran the mail room. He ran all the stuff that people pay big money for do now, but he was this humble person. He cared a lot about me, wanted to make sure I was safe, wanted to keep me from, taught me about relationships with white people. And if you're gonna play poker every now and then, you need some white chips. How to build relationships with folk and how to make your job so that they need you. I said, oh. And so if I had wanted to, as he drove the people to the beach and stayed down in another place, well, because he had to drive them back. If I wanted to go down, I could have gone to the beach and lived in one of those houses that you wouldn't be able to live in other than the fact that you were going down to do that. I had an aunt, my Aunt Margaret, who worked, she was a domestic worker. And you learn that there were some relationships you had. There were some white folk that knew you on the other side of town. For example, the great Jimmy Clapp played center for the Pittsburgh Steelers during their heyday. Railroad track coming through my uncle's service station on this side, on Edgecombe side. His father's feed store, where my grandfather took me to get chicken feed from, was on that side. Jimmy Clark and I stood on the railroad track and talked football. What did Booker T do that night? Okay? And what did Rocky Mount Senior High School do that night? So he would tell me all the great things he was doing, how the great plays he made, and how he was doing. So I said, oh, well, if he's telling me those things, I can make up lies too. So I would tell him what I was doing. Actually, I got thrown off the football team because I was way too dirty to play football. I thought it was war, and I thought the best thing was kill 2 or 3 people before the game was over. Then I later learned it was a sport. But so what I became was, the Coach Atkinson now, when he threw me off the team, he said, I got ejected out of a game, okay? I thought it was a fight. I didn't know, I thought it was a fight with helmets on. It took me a long time to realize football was a sport. I just thought it was a fight with helmets on. You just wear that the best you could. Then he said, you're gonna be my statistician. I didn't know how to spell statistician, much less pronounce it. And he said, I wanna know plus and minus yards. Watch this. He's teaching me statistics, which I would later want to run from in school. And then later when I worked on my doctorate, I wanted to embrace. And so I said, okay, but how deeply you've hurt me. You've thrown me off the football team. I can't get dates. And my folks are upset, and I can't tell them why I'm off the football team. And this is what you've done to me. But he was a member of my church. He said, and you're going to be in the press box with WEED, Rocky Mount. What am I going to do in the press box? You're going to spot for the announcer. And so what did I learn? I learned announcing as well as spotting for the announcer. That was number 15, John Doe, he picked up 4 yards on the play. And he would say, John Doe picked up 4 yards on the play, and that is first and goal for Booker T. Washington High School against the Legan High School. Legan was an arch rival. Legan High School. What happened in that? If we would go out of town, I would still go with the team. I would make a collect call to the Rocky Mount Evening Telegram and tell them all of the statistics. I'm gonna get that word right in a minute. And who had the most yards, who scored, from where did they score. Didn't have a calculator, but Coach made me learn how to do that. Plus minus yards, percentages. He made me learn how to do that. And so basketball season, I want to take a break. No. Now you got to learn shot percentage. Wait a minute, this is math. I protest. And if the guy made the shot and his number was 10, you put a circle around the 10 and you locate where he shot from, the amount of feet and what have you. Okay, got to travel again. Always a teaching moment. That same coach who I thought devastated me because he wouldn't let me play football also said, okay, the Rocky Mount Evening Telegram is going to give you a little money for what you do, calling back to games and stuff. What? Now, also want you to write for the school, and you'll have a byline. The only other person I knew, Mr. Randy Armstrong, a school principal, wrote news about Negroes in the Sunday paper. I ain't never seen another black person named nowhere in the paper with a little picture. Do you know, by Coach making me do that and making me learn how to write all that stuff up, and about my senior year, I was making $40 a month. Do you know how big that was? One of the $10 was good, but I had 3 more $10. But see, I was getting the information back to the newspaper because they weren't going to send a white reporter on a trip with a black high school. So I was working. I was actually working for the newspaper. And I was writing 2 or 3 other things for them.
Tell me about the railroad and the county line being.
Ain't nothing like Amtrak. If you want to plan a parade, plan 2 parades. Now, why I say that? Because if you're going down the Edgecombe side and the band is getting ready to go across the railroad track to go down the Nash side as part of the parade, wait, a freight train is going to come. And you may see the next part of the parade 45 minutes later. And they're standing waiting for the freight train to come through Rocky Mount. Rocky Mount was a seaboard coastline. And from New York to Florida is the route that the train takes going through Rocky Mount. Okay? Sunday, my Uncle Thomas, or either my Uncle Ulysses, my Aunt Margaret's husband, my Aunt Margaret was my mother's Alma's sister, would take us down to the train, get us an ice cream, and we would ride. We had cars. We were big-time black folk. They had Chryslers. And we would ride down and we would watch the trains come in and see who came. And guess what? Sometimes you could see Mr. Taylor or Mr. Chase, who were porters on the train, sleeping car porters. And man, that was a distinguished job. They would come off, they would be dressed up to the T, and they would come off the train and greet us. And sometimes you would take them some food. Ronald Chase, the late Ronald Chase, my buddy, his daddy would be on the train, and we would take them food, and they would tell us about, and we'd get a little piece of money, maybe 50 cents or so. And we would go down there and take them some food and shake their hand, and he would hug his daddy, and his daddy would take off, all aboard, and the train would leave. And so when my grandfather's park, Tom Stiff Park, had a merry-go-round and a train, and Mr. Chuck Woods, my uncle's other buddy, who was a band director at where? Booker T. You remember teachers didn't get paid in the summer? They had to have a job. Black teachers had to have a job for the summer. They would sometimes go to Wildwood, New Jersey to work. Sometimes stay in Rocky Mount. Mr. Chuck Woods would stay in Rocky Mount and run the park. He would run the park. Why? Because the man who normally ran the park was a member of our church. And Chuck Woods was a member of our church. So he got Chuck Woods a job in the summer running the park. So Chuck Woods was my uncle's friend, and he went to my church. And so I got the job of what? I was a train engineer with a miniature train in Tom Stiff Park. It had a Wisconsin engine in it and would go 80 miles an hour. Also ran the merry-go-round. And Mr. Woods couldn't figure out, why are you making so much money on the merry-go-round? We never made money on the merry-go-round. We made money on the train. But why are you making so much money? The reason I was making so much money, because I would sell not only one ride, I would sell 2 rides. But I would sell them 2 rides. Pay me for 2 rides. Okay, what's going to happen if we pay you for 2 rides? You're going to get 10 rides. And so when he would drive by and he would hear, and I would know what time he would come. And then the kids and everybody would be waiting, and they would bring me an album. Because you had a Victrola in the middle of the merry-go-round, and you had a stick to control the speed of the horses going around. And I would change the music, and the kids would hear some dum 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 dum. Never met a girl, and the Temptations would be on, and they would flock to the merry-go-round. How many rides can we get for 10 cents? Give me 20 cents. Okay, how many rides we get? That's supposed to be 2 rides. Oh man, okay, 5 rides. And they would ride all day. But the revenue was up in the ridership, okay? And in the evening, kids, when it was cool, they would bring the parents would bring the kids, and I would whoop, whoop, and it would be the train. And we would go around the track, Wisconsin throttle engine. We would go around, had everything, gauges, knew what I had to change oil. The train station was right there.
Were these open trains? Were they, you say miniature trains?
Yeah, open. You just sit down. It was big enough for adults to sit in with the children. Here we go. On the other side of town at Sunset Park, there was a merry-go-round and a train. As my son, the county commissioner, would say, Supreme Moore Omokunde, where's the horse for a child that's black? On the train, they put us in the car. On the bus, they put us in the back. But where's the horse for a child that's black? There ain't no back on a merry-go-round. That's not how Langston Hughes really said it originally. But where's a horse for a child that's black? Because there ain't no back on the merry-go-round. And yet, on the other side of town, Sunset Park, I couldn't go to that park. But we had a train on our other side. You see, we had a train on our side of town. Both parks set on the Tar River. Interesting enough, when the Tar River floods, both of those parks are underwater. But they had to be separate because I couldn't sit in the same seat with a little white kid in a train in Rocky Mount.
Did you know anything about Rocky Mountain Mills? Or
Oh, yes. We understand that's how Rocky Mount started on Falls Road. I go past Falls Road every now and then and look at that and see the mills started there. People worked at the mills.
What did you hear about the mills growing up?
That the mill could be as hard a work as working in the tobacco field. I remember in the tobacco field, I like to sucker and top tobacco because you could get tobacco worms and sell them for like 2 for a penny. And every catfish in the world couldn't wait to eat a tobacco worm. And you could sell them while you were working, you could pick worms, because the worm first would start, until you knew the worms would start, they could bite you, they were slimy, they were yucky, okay? And they wanted you to leave them alone, but you had to get them out to the back. You had to go in between the suckers and snap the flower off the back to make it grow. Me and God argued a lot in the tobacco field. One thing I told God one day was, God, you don't know what you're doing, because all these tobacco leaves are up here, and they're not ripe. And you ripe the ones on the bottom first. And I got to bend over and almost crawl through the rows to get the bottom ones upright. And God told me, say, don't worry about it, because before you go back to school, you're going to get the top leaves too. So I said, okay, all right. That was $6.75 a day. And don't you know, working at a tobacco field, you didn't spend that $6.75 foolishly. After you've been out, you left about 4 o'clock in the morning to go down to the Social Security office and sit out there and wait for somebody to pick you up and say, boy, you know how to hand the backer, you know how to prime the backer, you know how to sucker the backer? Yes, sir. Get on the truck. And you come back in the evening. I couldn't swim. And so at 105 degrees, I'm supposed to watch the farmer and give them a clue when the farmer's coming back so they get out the pond. Well, I got between the rows because tobacco rows are cool in between the rows. And I found me a watermelon. And I busted the watermelon. It could have been on a postcard. You know, I used to have us on postcards. And I busted a watermelon and ate the watermelon and nodded out. And I heard gravel kicking up from the truck tires. Oh, man. And they were still in, I couldn't call out to them. I was waving at them. They didn't see me. They were still in the pond. Well, I'm not paying none of you niggers nothing. And yet you're going to go back to work and finish your job for the rest of the day. A little colored boy spoke up. And I looked around to see who it was. And lo and behold, it was me. And you see, you have some on one shoulder and some on another telling you what to say. This shoulder said, well, you be quiet and shut up. Because you already had a shotgun drawn on you at another farm. And he said, I'm paying none of your niggers nothing. I said, yes, sir, you gonna pay us. What'd you say? I said, you gonna pay us. And then there was a frog in my throat. I said, you gonna pay us? He said, say something else to me. I said, well, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but you're gonna pay us. I said, because if you don't, we're going back to town. We're gonna tell everybody, because you put us off in the projects. That's where you picked us up from. That's where you put us off from. We're gonna tell everybody in the project, don't get on your truck in the morning, because you won't pay people. He said, well, I'll pay you then. I said, you ain't gonna help me. They ain't gonna whip my head when we get back in the project. You're gonna pay everybody. He said, well, I'll do it this time. Stay out of my pond. Yes, sir. At least this time I won't go to sleep. I'll watch and I'll know when you're coming back. Because I know you're going to go off and drink corn liquor. And you're always more ornery in the evening than you were in the morning.
What else did you pick up from the mill?
I didn't have to deal with the mill. I thought one time about going to work there, but once again, my granddaddy, Tom Stiff, my uncle Wimberly, when I was getting ready, came home from college, I came home early one weekend and took the postal exam. I was the first African-American mail carrier in Rocky Mount. Took the postal exam. And I was going to Johnson C. Smith University in Charlotte. And I carried the mail on what street? Atlantic Avenue. That was my whole route. All of Atlantic Avenue. So what did I do? Atlantic Avenue was about a mile. No more than maybe a mile and a little bit, 1.5 miles. So everybody knew me. So I would deliver my mail and come back. And the test was, they said, that test is hard. How did you pass that test? Oh, I scored like 90-something on the 10. I'm a college student, ignoramus. I mean, I wouldn't say it to the white people. I said, you stupid white person, I'm a college student. I can't pass this exam. And you got, how many veterans points you got? I didn't get no veteran point. I'm not a veteran since 1966. And then I said, I am not going back to college. I saw that first check from the post office. No way, I'm going back to college. My uncle said, you're going back to college. Well, it was a seasonal job.
How did you get your name? I wanted to get back to
Me and my daddy had this long talk. The other name I had, and you'll find out anyway, so I might as well tell you, one of them was Vernon. Vernon is a Norwegian name, and it's the Norwegian people with the white hair and the pink eyes. The most fairest people in the world are named Vernon. And I would begin to see and study the great about Surgeon Adifumi. They had an African village in South Carolina. And I studied African culture. And I realized, do I look like a Norwegian with white blonde hair and pink blue eyes? Almost an albino? Give me a break. Tolokun means child of the ocean spirit. Omokunde means child from the ocean has arrived. And when I was studying African culture and tracing my roots, my maternal side of the family comes from Victoria Beach in Lagos, Nigeria. Awori Yoruba. I'm like an Awori Yoruba. My daddy's side comes from the great Benin Kingdom, with the Benin Bronze and the Queen Mothers and the Oba of Benin. My family were royalty in the palace of the kings. And so I was initiated several times. The last initiation was in Nigeria. I was initiated into Ogboni Society, the Society of Chiefs. When I went there, I didn't have the fantasy about Nigeria being this fantasy place. Because, you know, you come to New York, yo, my brother, in New York, my brother, you want to buy a watch, man? I don't want to buy no watch, I'm going to Africa. All right, my brother, I got these watches for you. Get off the plane in Nigeria. Oh, my brother, how are you? You want to buy a watch? No. So I was fortunate to meet His Royal Highness Oba T.A. Opeldu. Opeldu looked like my father. And somebody said, there's a man that looks just like your father. Okay. And I met him in Virginia. They were having a ceremony. They stopped the ceremony and asked me to stay in Virginia. And they gave me my first initiation into the Ogboni Chief Society. Then I went to Nigeria. When I went to Nigeria, what happened was interesting because they came to me one day and said, we have been watching you. And the elders said, you always respect them. Well, I had to respect Miss Hawkins. I had to respect folk growing up in Booker T, so it wasn't hard for me to respect the elders. They said, we're going to make you an Oluwa. What is an Oluwa? That is the highest chief we have in the Iledi. Iledis are houses, Ogboni houses, or chief houses they have in order to be organized. Oluwa, yes. And so then we're also going to initiate you as a Babalawo, father of secrets. They taught you about herbs and psychology and whatever. Okay. When I went to Oba Opeldu's villa out in the countryside, see, because if you are king, his palace was in Lagos, or Eko in the language. You can't stay in your mama's house and rule nothing. So your mother stays outside in her own compound, in her own little village. I laid on the ground for his mother and prostrated for his mother. And she blessed me, okay. The next morning, I hear something, Tolokun Omokunde, Adifa fun. What? Ashaduro, Dura fun. It was an old man. About 6 o'clock He's come at daybreak or something. He's coming to pray for me. And as he's praying, I'm putting money on his head. I'm dashing him, spraying him with money. They take a fifth of gin, and they hold the bottle. The bottom of it is here, and the top goes back in the unscrew, and they pour it without getting anything out. I don't know how they do it. And we drinking gin for breakfast. Well, you know, native drink. And they're praying for me. Next morning, Tolokun. What is that? It is the king's aunt coming to pray for me. Naira on her head. Then I go to a ceremony. It seemed like the ceremonies just come together. I know they were dancing all night, and they came and made me sit down, and made people leave me alone. When I first got off the bus, a little boy was always crying and ran and grabbed me and would not turn me loose. And I said, well, what's wrong? What's going on? What's your name? Is it Kasim? And what I found out was that Kasim's father had died, the king's brother. And I looked identical to his father. So Kasim and I sat down, and we talked. We had some very powerful talks. And Kasim, like the other little boy, who was Kasim's cousin and thought I looked like his uncle, he and I sat down in the councils because he was a little prince. So we sat in different councils together, and here's this little boy sitting next to me. And they would pass stuff around to eat in the council, and they passed me one drink. I said, oh, and the little boy said, Adbara, that is powerful drink. I said, yes, it is. What is it? And so those two little boys I met, and so Kasim and I, we were arguing. He said, no, Baba. I said, yes. I said, division is subtraction. He said, no, Baba, it is division. Okay, you have 3 apples. And your sister comes, and you're dividing apples now. But when you leave, your brother comes, you only have 1 apple. Your brother and your sister come. He said, oh, I see. If you divide, you're actually subtracting. Yes. You're getting less than. I said, now multiplication, oh, he was ready for that. 1 times 2 is 2, 1 times 3 is 3, 1 times 4. Then he went through multiplicity of tables with me. I said, but you just add in. No, Baba. Oh, for reason, I'm sorry, Baba. You know, I don't want to dispute you. But Baba, it is multiplication. I said, what is 3 times 3? He said, Baba, 9. I said, what's 3 plus 3? 6. Add 3 more. What do you have? 9. Oh, Baba, it is magic. You are right. I said, I didn't know nothing about math. I couldn't stand math in school. I was allergic to math. But that was the relationship we developed. And so the next time I went to the next ceremony, I went down to lay down on the ground for the queen mother, the king's mother. She grabbed me and picked me up and got on the ground herself. I said, what have they given me? I didn't know what they'd given me till I got to the airport. And they put a submachine gun on me and asked me the fundamental question, just where do you think you live in America? Tell me, just where do you think you live in America? And boy, I got belligerent. I live in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I'm going to America. Oh, beautiful for spacious skies. Oh, say, can you see? I did everything I could. The only thing that saved me, they thought I was trying to escape out of the country. They saw the marks. They saw the stuff I had in the bag that indicated that the chieftaincy that I had. And they heard me speaking Yoruba language. You ain't going nowhere. A lot of people who are supposed to be kings don't want to be, and they come to America. And that's what they had surmised that I was doing.
I did notice you had the scribe, what do they call it?
Eli. And the Europeans call them tribal marks because they don't know any better. These are called Eli. This is Oyo proper, Oyo people proper. Because I came up through the Oyo people, under the Alafins of Oyo and in the Ilefe.
What do you know about your slave ancestry?
Coolmore Plantation in Edgecombe County. They come out of Virginia, about the stiffs come out of like Emporia, Virginia, and I did not know there were any white stiffs. All the STITH, all of the stiffs that are African American in the United States are related to each other. And one day, I heard there was some stiffs, a store in Winston-Salem a long time ago closed to a stiff. My sons were on Marquette University's campus in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and there's a story I'm going to tell you about that that's strange. And they ran into a white boy named Stiff, and they called me and said, "Do you want us to beat him up?" I said, "That's your slave name about people. That boy has the right to have me called a Stiff. Leave that boy alone before y'all go to jail. You know, you are going to jail. Leave that boy alone." Marquette University. My son, Supreme Shawan, they played football. The deal was, I will enroll in school at 50 years old. I will make the football team if you can get your grades better. So, the first game, starting linebacker. Here I am at 50 years old, playing college football. Talk about racism. I would look at the signals, because I was a captain when I was in the game. I was a defensive captain when I was in the game. I would look at coach. Coach would say, 57 over. I want you to move over the center. I don't want to move over the center, because the center is going to hurt me real bad at 50 years old. And I would stand here, and the other team would turn their backs to the other team and look at me, and they were all standing over there. There had to be somebody, some white kid, that figured I shouldn't be the only one standing over here, and he would turn and stand over there with me. And I would look at him and say, "You're supposed to be over there. I want to stand here." In other words, all right, you got to be the captain. So I said, "Okay, what play we going to do?" Come on, man. Come on, man. What play we going to do? Since I can't be captain all by myself, you should know what the signal is coming from the sideline, what the coach is giving me. The other coaches over there doing all kind of stuff like baseball signal. That's not the one who's actually giving me the signal. It's the assistant coach I'm looking at that's giving me the signal for the play. The other coach is giving all kind of signals to throw off the other team. The other coach just told me 57 over. I want you over the center. When the ball is snapped, I want you to rush the center. And he said, "Oh, come on, man." Then I did like that in the hall, which meant same play we did the last time. And this, you know, you never get away from it. But Rocky Mount prepared me for a lot of these kinds of things.
So the Stiffs were on
Coolmore Plantation. We had a family reunion on Coolmore Plantation.
Tell me about that.
I didn't like it. My cousin, Thomas Stiff III, didn't like it. And they went inside. I refused to go inside. The slave quarters was out there. I refused to go into there.
What was the name of the slave of your family?
Stiff. It was a Stiff.
Do you know the first name?
It could have been Edward. But I do know something, though. Part of our family was Wimberly, too. And Wimberly, the lady that taught me in school, and the first lady that whipped me because she was illiterate. No, I say that. This is the joke. I had a note going to school. I could not get whippings because I had asthma. One day I decided to fight a girl. Lost. It was TKO. The girl beat me in like first round because we was fighting in the cloakroom. You remember those old cloakrooms? They had the iron bars coming out you hung your clothes on? I backed into one of those in my back. And Laura caught me with a good lick. I didn't understand why I had to get a whipping. That was double jeopardy. The girl I was fighting whipped me. Now the teacher's gonna whip me too. Looked like I could have been spared one of those whippings. And the teacher, but there's a note. There's a note. And she said, I'm your relative. Hold out your hand. She had her strap. Her name was Miss Annie Wimberly Battle. The battles that that were related to the Stiffs.
Do you know how you're related to the Wimberleys?
My grandfather had a half-sister that was a Wimberly, or Wimberly married into the Stiffs, like the second marriage into the Stiffs.
What was your grandfather's name?
Thomas Stiff. But see, before him, there was Ed Stiff. There was a whole bunch of Stiffs. There was another Thomas Stiff. His parents were, I think, it would have to come back to me who his parents were. And my cousin has, and I have it written down.
Are you related to Dred Wimberly?
Probably so. Yeah, probably so. I think so. Yeah, I think that's part of that Wimberly Stiff combination. I think the second marriage of his parents, his mother, was part of that Dred Wimberly or what have you. Also, it produced Mamie, we call her Aunt Mamie Gant, who was an educator here in Oxford, North Carolina. I think she was a married Gant. That was her married name. I think she was a married Wimberly. My grandfather's half-sister, who he adored.
And did you hear any stories about Coolmore?
Yeah, I just didn't like it.
Tell me a story
About
Coolmore.
the boats that would come up from Virginia and slaves would get off and come to Coolmore. Around Emporia, Virginia, there's a little place outside of Emporia, Virginia. And I asked him, I said, you know any Stiffs down there that's African American? The man told me, everybody down there is a Stiff, and everybody's African American. It's about 8 miles outside of Emporia, Virginia. For example, Tom Stiff, that played for St. Bonaventure, and his brother had a brother named Sam Stiff that played for Syracuse basketball, were out of the Philadelphia Stiffs that came out of that same clan, that Virginia clan. The Stiff that played for the Denver Nuggets, that came out of Virginia, part of that same clan. Stiff in Boston, Reverend Stiff in Boston, that married the doctor, what was her name, Deborah Pratho Stiff. They had all those great programs in Boston for health, same clan.
I believe there was a Stiff that was the teacher of Thomas Jefferson, who was his favorite teacher. That might be the same.
Probably so. If it's out of that Virginia clan. And so Coolmore was in Edgecombe County.
What does it look like?
What has happened with Coolmore now? Some of the actual family members now got it or something. It belonged to the Historical Society one time, and something happened to Coolmore. We can't go back on it. I don't want to go back on it, but we can't go back on it. It belongs to the Historical Society. Now somebody's actually staying on it, or in other words, they were reclaiming their land.
Is there any final thought that you wanted to tell about Rocky Mount itself, about your memories, something that stands out?
When integration hit, we could now go to the Center Theater. Booker T Theater was going down, okay. We had to go to the balcony. And that's when we had the ice wars. Remember the plastic Dixie cups? Remember, they wouldn't crush the ice for us upstairs in the balcony. We got block chunks of ice in our drink. You finish your drink, you ball them up, and the ice edges would come out. And every now and then, you would just throw one downstairs. Well, we hit somebody. This one they decided, maybe for the sake of health reasons, to close the balcony and just let the black folk go downstairs and sit in the back. Same difference. So it came from the back from them. What them? And every now and then, somebody would come and sit on the side and they, hey, there was a newspaper guy here named Al Carson, the editor, used to be the editor of the paper here. He grew up during that time. Al and I talked quite a bit about Rocky Mountain and the different parts of Rocky Mountain. Rocky Mountain taught me some very powerful lessons that will go anywhere I go in the country. One, you are just as good as anybody else. Don't act like you're better than anybody else. Secondly, you have a civic responsibility to your community. That's why I think I'm going to jump in the Board of Education race. Because the legacy, I cannot leave children who can't read and write. And we do know if they can't read on a third grade level by the third grade, they're 4 times as likely as anybody else to drop out of school or not finish school or not be successful. By the third grade, we know how many prisons you're going to need. I can't leave that legacy to my children and to my children's children. Because Rocky Mountain has taught me that you have a civic responsibility to do something for your community, to be on something that relates to your community. You have a civic responsibility to do that, and you must do it. It's an obligation.
Did you see the way the schools declined related to integration?
Yes, yes.
Tell me about that.
Well, what happened in Rocky Mount was they first wanted the best and brightest of the students. But the law says everybody should be educated. Now, about a couple of years after I graduated, now we have people in my class of 66 that went to Rocky Mount Senior High as experiments. We consider them our classmates, and we get together for reunions. We all get together with them. They were the top students at Booker T. And they wanted the very best and brightest of students. And the very best and brightest of students we gave them, and we still have very best and brightest of students, because we still have Miss Hawkins. We still have Miss Marguerite Armstrong. We still had Mr. Witherspoon, who taught math and biology. Mr. Sharp, who taught math. Okay? We called him Ram, Mr. Richard Myers, who put his hand in his pocket and played with his mustache and could do more history and whatever than the books had in it. And he could do verbatim out of the books. And I still go see his wife in the nursing home. Miss Pash, who her husband taught me how to cuss and how to drive. Because he would cuss me out every day in the car for slamming on brakes too hard in the driver's ear of his car. And he had his own, you know, but he taught me how to drive. Before she passed recently, about 98. And she would say, I want to sit on the back porch and have lemonade with you. Come and see me. We do that in honor of those ancestors who carried us through Booker T. Booker T was one of the top schools in the country of African Americans, I'm told, certified school. The choir, Booker T. Washington Senior High School choir, was top in the state. We got only ones. One was superior, very good was 2. The only other school that we thought was as good as us, Mary Potter, Oxford, North Carolina, under the direction of Miss Henriette Howell. Not Miss Roberta Howell. Henriette Howell was the woman who told Dr. Shaw, stay here and build a church. And so what happened when he built that church, they sent $300 down. Mary Potter and Timothy Darling was his professor in school, and we're sitting in Timothy Darling. And it's through that Rocky Mount experience that made me stay at Timothy Darling when other churches offered me more money than I could count. But that Rocky Mount experience say, you stay here, grow where you're planted. tell some children here that they can be something. Yeah, okay.
And then with integration of what happened that it went down?
Well, what happened and it went down is we were fighting to eat and pay people to eat at their restaurant when the food wasn't as good. We were paying people just to sit down next to white people and eat. We were getting our heads whipped so we could sit at a lunch counter. And the food was better back at the other restaurants we had on Douglas Block, Mr. Brown's Cafe. You don't get no better than Mr. Brown's food. It's because integration made us think that white folks' ice was colder than our ice. And some of us today still think the same thing. And we don't aspire. And so what happened to, for example, when I talked to Dr. Naeem Akbar, the clinical psychologist, and we talk about things, we come to the conclusions that what we have to do is integration now has, we have to repair damages to African American males. We have to restore competency to African American males. I tell boys, if you practice math as much as you practice basketball, you'll be slam dunking math too. I look at what's her name, Tierra Quinn. Girl is 23 years old. MIT graduate, was working at NASA before she graduated from MIT and is getting ready to build the most powerful rocket ship that's ever been built as a design analogy. And I say, well, how in the world could you learn all this stuff? Her mama made her clip coupons, she put them together, and by the time she got to the cash register, she had already compute what she was going to save. It can still be done. We have a genius in our children. Dr. Murray McLeod Bethune, $1.50 in a trash pile in Daytona Beach, built Bethune-Cookman College. And then decided that she wanted to have a ship named after Harriet Tubman, my cousin, by the way, on my father's side. She was a Harriet Ross, and she married a Tubman. We called her Minta. Our Minta was her name, and we call her Minta. And she sold tea cakes. This National Negro Women's Organization sold tea cakes. They started selling them again about 5 or 10 years ago. They were not as good as the Mississippi tea cakes, but they sold tea cakes. And she christened the USS Harriet Tubman. Trash pile. Didn't even have the first month rent of $11. I first went down there, I had to clean the trash off of her gravesite. Fortunately, the next time I went down there, I was able to see the eternal flame. Integration taught me a lot, that things were diluted a lot. One no more Saturday school. We thought we had made it. We played basketball with white people. We enjoy white people quite a bit. And I have friends that are dear to me that are white. Young man told me, I didn't want to take credit for it though, because I didn't want him telling people. He said, Chief, they called me Chief, and also after my granddad in Milwaukee. He said, Chief, you told me, don't never have a white man as your best friend. I said, I don't remember telling you that, but okay, okay, what are you trying to tell me? He said, there was a man in my building who tried to be my best friend. And I remember what you said. I don't want to go drink beer with him. I didn't want to go to his house and that. You know who that man was? Dolphman, that killed all those people in Milwaukee. He said, Dolphman would try, he said, you told me don't have him my best friend. I would never go in his house. I said, all right, young man, thank you very much. Moving right along. Integration messed with black businesses as well. My uncle was a believer in black business. He was an entrepreneur when he came home from the post office. He taught me a lot. He had a bus. He cut the bus out, drove out into the countryside, sold clothes, sold candy. A kid would get on the bus, bring him so many bottles. bottles. Bottles was 10 cents per bottle. Now the kid, if he realized he could have gone somewhere else, and he bought a candy bar, for 50 cents, when he could have bought it for 40 cents. But he was shopping in my uncle's bus. My uncle had to make a profit off the candy bar. It was 5 bottles. It wasn't actual money. It was 5 bottles, and my uncle had figured that one out somehow. This 8th grade education he had. And my uncle reminded me one time, in order to deal with integration and whatever, he said, I sent you to Johnson C. Smith. So you're supposed to be smart, you're supposed to know how to do things. Okay. What did integration do? Integration also caused us to think that we had arrived and everything was over. There was no more Jim Crow. Now, we are not prepared to deal with James Crow Jr., Esquire. And so that's what we have prepared to deal with now. People don't mind calling us niggers anymore. It's almost as if, oh, well, it's a new day. And we hear it always now. What are we doing? We're making America great again. Okay. And some of us seem to think that we're taking America back again, back to where it used to be, that where we might need Saturday school again. We know we need tutorial programs. I do a rites of passage program for African-American males. That's what I did in Milwaukee, where we actually teach them how to be men, because we're repairing the damages, the 3 damages. Our aspirations have been damaged. What I want to be a basketball player. And I tell them, ain't gonna be no more basketball. What would you do then? What about making the basketball? What about selling the basketball? What about owning a team? Second, our expectations have been damaged. We don't expect nothing out of you because your daddy didn't stay around and you no good like your no good daddy, and we don't expect nothing out of you. So we got to raise our level of expectation. Because when I would watch Dr. L.P. Armstrong, the doctor that delivered half the babies in Rocky Mount, back his car out, one day I said, can I wash that car? And then when I got 16, may I back it out the yard and back it back in? Okay. The cleaning man, Mr. Wimberly in Rocky Mount, who was related to us, had a cleaners. And he had a roadmaster with the spokes. And washing him with the big, wide white walls. And I learned to get the Ajax and everything and wash this car. My uncle taught me how to wash cars without streaking them so they would be smooth, or get the right towel to put on them, and how to rub the car. And I would wash his car at the cleaners. When I got older, I worked in his cleaners. I worked for the Neville's in Rocky Mount, who own a florist. Now you can't find a black florist nowhere in Rocky Mount. At the florist. One of the things why he hired me is because I was one of the trustworthy children. When somebody died on our street or around the block from our street, I collected the money for the floral arrangement from the community. I documented who paid what, how much I had, and then I found somebody, if it was $5.95, I found somebody to give a nickel.
Now I know that you're related to Dred Wimberly because I know 2 of his sons own that cleaners.
Yeah.
John and I don't
John
know.
Wimberly had a daughter named Quay Wimberly.
Tell me about the cleaners and
Well,
John Wimberly.
I think Miss Wimberly, who also liked me, and I ate in her house, one of the things I learned early in life, and I told my wife one day, she got very upset. I've been doing what I wanted to do since I was 5 years old. I do exactly what I want to do when I want to do it. How did I learn that? Magic words. Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am. Yes, sir. No, sir. May I please? Thank you so much. Those are magic words. And I learned them, and I tried to behave myself, so I got to do things I wanted to do. I never argued with my mama. My mama was about 5'3", and that lady didn't play. I never. One time I was 40 years old and didn't make up my bed. And she came and got me and said, go check your bed and don't go out till you check your bed. Okay? Next time, used to like root beer. I got a root beer. She said, you're not bringing it in my house. Why, Mama? Little Mama I called her, because Big Mama was the ruler. Little Mama was just an assistant. My mama was the assistant. She said, because it has beer on it. But it's about that. You're not bringing it in here. Yes, ma'am. The Wimberlys were, it was amazing. We had two terms we used, high yellow and red bone, for light-skinned women. Mr. Wimberly was black as the car tires on his roadmaster, and his wife was a red bone, kind of like high yellow. But so was my grandmother, and so was my wife, okay? We won't go into that whole story of things, but it was just that there was a rainbow of colors in our family, based on a lot of things, not sometimes because of a slavery situation, but because it was. Halawashaponi married into, a Native American married into, and got along very well. I'm trying to find my Native American part of my background now too. God know I got it, but nobody wants to talk. I thought at first it would be naturally to look to Cherokee, but don't know yet, and I'm gonna work on that next. The Wimberlys were entrepreneurs. They had the best house that I ever seen, all brick, modern stuff inside. I think she was a school teacher or something. He owned business. And you could borrow money to payday and a whole bunch of other things. He cleaned your clothes. Some people had a bill, their preachers had a bill, and they come and pay their bill and get their clothes cleaned. Because I was washing them in the back in the sewing machine and spotting them and what have you. And first I started just taking them to the back, give them to the people who were pressing. And then I learned how to do some other things.
How many people worked for him?
Oh, about 6, I guess, 6 or 7. And then he sold it to Mr. Thorne. That's when I really started doing more technical things with Mr. Thorne.
What years did you work in the cleaners?
Oh, I think maybe 62, 63, somewhere in there, 63, 64.
So the John Wimberly must have been an older man by then?
Mm-hmm, by that time. And I think John Wimberly was in Mount Pisgah Presbyterian Church. I'm not sure. Quay Wimberly was his daughter. She was just a pretty something. I would have worked for free. And she was nice. She was kind.
And are there any stories about the cleaners or anything about the Wimberly?
Well, when he had to struggle when they came out with a 1-hour choratizing on the other side of town that we used to couldn't go to. And then when they opened up to realize how many preachers had clothes that had to be clean and how people like, black people like to dress in Rocky Mount, it became this competition. And it was a struggle. When Mr. Thorne got it, by the time Mr. Thorne got it, it was a struggle. Okay?
What is 1 hour?
It was a 1-hour clean. You come back in 2 hours and get your clothes. We called it, they had a process called choratizing.
And this was in the 60s?
Yeah, 60s and the 70s. But you also got to realize that one of the major pieces that happened in Rocky Mount, the first Hardee's was built in Rocky Mount. Of all these Hardee's you see now, the first Hardee's was in Rocky Mount. Cheeseburgers were about this big. Flame broil. We never had a problem with Hardee's. We would be in the parking lot, the white students would be in the parking lot. Never a problem.
It was all drive-through?
Yeah.
Well,
you know, you walked up to it, not a drive-through. You walked up to it, you got your, and you ate in the car with your date.
Tell me about that opening. What was that?
The Hardee's opening, the grand opening, the first opening. People walked up, And it was, and black folk were dignified. You got a chance to walk up to a place, order what you want, pay, walk out and sit in your car. And we weren't gonna do anything because we wanted, you know, we were at that point now, we don't, when black folk would embarrass us when they would go places and do things, and we didn't want to be embarrassed. And so we would behave ourselves. The other kids were rowdy, but they didn't bother us, they didn't call us names. I never remember an incident happening at all. Because the kids were so glad to have a place to go, and the burgers were good. Flame broil, it was like a cookout. What they call now the cookout place, Hardee's was the original cookout place. You could see the fire coming up on your burger, on your patty. And that patty was good. And French fries, man, what you talking about? McDonald's couldn't hold up nothing to Hardee's in those days.
Was there already a McDonald's there?
No, Hardee's. Hardee's was owned by the folk who later owned Garner's Barbecue, Pepsi Cola, you know, Mayola ice cream, Garner, all that was Hardee's.
And so that's where it started, and then it got franchised?
It got franchised all over the place. Yeah. And it was right across the railroad track from my uncle's service station.
Tell me a little, I know I'm going further, but this is important. Tell me more about the railroad and the Nash and Edgecombe and the white.
Now,
black.
what I was telling you, a parade would be going down the street, and it would turn and go across the track, but they would have to stop. Half of the band might be on one side of the track, the other. Here comes the freight train coming through, and about an hour later, the parade begins again. So you see two parades on Christmas parade. You see two. The train station was a hub. You had some African Americans that worked there as porters and what have you. And you would go down on Sunday to watch trains come through. The Negro Leagues played in Rocky Mount. My grandfather, Tom Stiff, knew Satchel Paige. And so I got to see all the games. Two things you did in Rocky Mount: you went to school and you played baseball if you were a kid. I spoke at his funeral. At 5 years old, I decided I was not going to talk. I'm not going to talk. I don't need to talk. I'm not going to talk. They didn't know what to do with me. I wouldn't talk. And if I talk like this. I told you I'm not going to talk. Miss Sarah Leonard, the wife of the great Walter Buck Leonard of the Homestead Graves, told my granddaddy, build a podium for him in the backyard. I'm going to work with him on speech therapy. She didn't call it speech. I'm going to get him talking. Build a podium, put a robe on him, and make him preach every day for an hour. I'll be preaching in the backyard. Put chairs out there. I didn't have but one parishioner. That was my dog, Lassie. I tied Lassie up for them summers. Lassie got tired of me and left and joined another church. Chewed the rope. I had the only dog I would call, and of course, if my dog was named Lassie, what did my family nickname me? Timmy. Because Timmy and Lassie on television. I would say, Lassie, just like Timmy would come on every night we would watch TV. Lassie, that would be Timmy. Lassie would look at me and go around the block to my aunt's house and hide under the porch. We said, no, it's the same sermon every day. I'm tired up out there. And so eventually, that's how I began to talk. By the time I got ready to go to kindergarten and wanted to go to first grade, she had me talking.
And that started when your grandfather died?
No, my grandfather, that started way before when I was like 50. Well, I was like kindergarten, in pre-kindergarten. I wouldn't talk. I didn't want to talk. I had nothing to say. If I said it, you wasn't going to be able to hear, understand. Also, I learned how to bat from Mr. Walter Buck Leonard. He played for the Homestead Graves. Lifetime batting average of 341. First home run I ever hit was in Buckland Park. I used to have to fight the person to play my position because the manager wouldn't make a decision. He would start me, and then Billy Blue would want to play. I fought with Billy Blue and them all the way through Pony League. I played with the Bad Boys all the way, played baseball with the Bad Boys all the way through Pony League. And then when I got into the church in South Carolina, I had 2 churches as a student pastor. I played with the Chesterfield All-Stars in Chesterfield, South Carolina. All because one day Satchel Paige came to town to play. And they were in Talbot Park. Now Talbot and Tom Stewart Park are joined together. Satchel Paige took his team and got back on the bus. My granddaddy went on the bus and negotiated with him. Satchel Paige told my granddaddy that the people in the jungle were not as wild as the pitchers he had on his team. He said they were wilder than people in the jungle. So Satchel Paige cut a deal with my granddaddy because adults had paid 50 cents to get in, and they didn't want to lose money. So Satchel Paige pitched for both teams. When he pitched against our team, he struck out the first 2 batters. But what first he did, he made everybody leave the field except the first baseman, the catcher, and himself. He struck out the first 2 batters. He let the other batter hit back to him. He threw to first base, and he was out. 3 outs. My granddaddy loved the Brooklyn Dodgers. So we were the first on our block to get a TV. The man that worked at the post office had a TV. And we used to watch the Gillette fights, the Brooklyn Dodgers. We liked Jersey Joe Walcott. He was a boxer. Sugar Ray Robinson. And the Brooklyn Dodgers with Don Newcomb, Juan Marshall. All the Brooklyn Dodgers first we had black players on. And then we finally saw Jackie Robinson play. Roy Campanella, we really liked Roy Campanella as a catcher.
You saw Jackie Robinson play from your TV?
From the TV, I think. We had Josh Gibson, all the home run hitters, the 61 home run hitters, all this. But Josh Gibson hit 90 home runs 1 year.
I hate to call this to end, but I guess we'll have to redo this if we have more to add later.
Okay.
This has been a pleasure. Thank you.
Well, somebody let me rant and rave and go on and on. I never had this opportunity before, and I really appreciate it.
Well, you informed us, and you're informing the future, so thank you for that.
Thank you so very much.